computer. Okay, we're going to start now. In this class, we're going to cover from just a summary on relevant points from the following Sifim, Gimel, from 13 through 22. 13 through 22. Okay, not necessarily Sif, but just some of the relevant points. Okay, and maybe some points that are related to that. Okay, so let's share screens firstly. Okay, so firstly we learned. Oh, here we go. Okay, so all right, in Sif Yud Gimel in 13, it talked about on the topic that we mentioned, which is Siddur Bal Chov. Siddur Bal Chov is a concept which we learned in the Gemara Erechin on 23b, which says that when a person is stuck and they can't pay off a debt, and usually it's talking about like you make a commitment to the treasury of the temple, you want to give some sort of dedication, and you're not able to pay for it. So now what? So the Gemara tells us that the Beis Din has to get involved. They're going to make sure that you start selling items so you only have a certain amount of bare minimal needs. What is bare minimal needs? Classically translated is 30 days of food and 12 months of garments. And that's basically it. Maybe some sort of basic roof over your head. But really beyond that, nothing is given over to, they could be taken away from the person. Garments that belong to his wife. So it depends if it's about money that he was going to purchase, they would take it away. But if we're talking about garments that he already purchased for them, no, they wouldn't take away. Okay, fine. Especially not Shabbos weekday clothes, especially not. Or so too for his kids if he already purchased them. Now in 13, it goes on to say that if somebody has more than what he's allowed to have and he doesn't want to give it over, they could even give him a hit. They could even, the Shlich Beis Din could force him to do his mitzvah of paying up his chov, paying up his debt. Okay? The point is that they don't think it's going to happen. Like I know a guy right now, he owes money to someone. And he says, I'll pay you. I 100% agree in theory and practice to pay you. But it's been years. He didn't pay him in years. The person has money. They have money, but they just don't want to pay. So what do you do? So that's why Shlich Beis Din would physically force a person to pay. Nowadays, the Beis Din doesn't exercise that option of forcing people to pay or going in and taking stuff away from them. That's a thing that you need to consider when giving a loan to someone. And therefore, you might want to use the option of taking a security payment, a security deposit. And that is what the main focus of what we're going to be doing today is from subsection 14, 15, and all. It's talking primarily about the idea of taking a security. And it's very relevant today because it's rare that you're going to find this idea called Siddur Bal Chov. Okay, so let's see, number one, what did we learn in Sif subsection 14? We learned that there is a difference between a loan and other financial obligations with collecting a security. I'll give an example. What we learned in sections 7 through 13 were about various restrictions when collecting a security so as not to violate a biblical prohibition. For example, it's not that you can just go ahead and take out some security from the guy's hand or take some sort of payment because he's not coming up with the money. We know that there's prohibitions in the Torah. Chutz Talmud, you have to stand outside. You can't just go in and just take stuff. And even when someone could, it would have to be a shliach beis din, a messenger of the court, and you have to be careful that they're not acting like a noishe, that they're not acting like a forceful creditor, right? So there are many halachic implications which play out, which were scattered through sections 7 through 13. Okay. However, in subsection 14, we learn that when it's not an actual physical money loan, rather it was another type of debt, such as lack of payment for rent or wages, right? You were working for somebody, and he said, okay, I'm going to pay at the end of the month. The end of the month, he didn't pay, and, or he was a hired help for something, or some sort of thing. Okay, you rented a car, you didn't pay it back yet, right? Or you rented you're paying the rent for the home. So those things are not exactly like a loan. In what way are they different? That the difference is that it's not forbidden for the creditor to collect the security himself. There is no prohibition in such a case for him to take the collateral or the security when he's like, oh, look, you're not going to pay me for my home, for me renting out this my apartment of mine that belongs to me. Okay, so I'm going to pull something out of your hand when I have a chance. That would not be considered forbidden. He does not need the owner, or the person who's owed money does not need an agent of the court to collect the security for him. Okay, so now with that said, that's very important, because it comes out, like, let's say, a simple example would be a late rent notice. There would be no problem. So we're learning in 14, right, that you can go over to someone and you can say, hey, you didn't pay me rent. What do you mean? Does it not say that you're not supposed to be a forceful creditor? Just like by a loan, you have to be very careful. You have to make sure. Well, if you know that he has money and he still doesn't want to pay, then it's not prohibited to go over to him and try to, nudge him. But if you do know he doesn't have money, then you can't, right? That's by a loan, and he's not and we learned last class that the borrower is not obligated to hire himself out to pay off his loan, because it says in Torah that you're avadim li, that the Bnei Yisrael, the Jews, are the servants of Hashem. They're not servants of other people. They don't have to hire them. If the guy doesn't want to work, it's not right. It's not right if he owes the money, he doesn't want to work. But he can't be forced to work. However, when it comes, so to say, that's always a concern. When you give a loan, you're really taking a lot of risks. However, when we are talking about like payment for rent or something like that, so then there is a difference. You can be a nudge, as they say. You could send sorry about that. And you can send a late rent notice. You could nudge. The only real prohibition, or the only real concern you'd have to find out is it fitting with legal landlord laws and regulations, landlord-tenant laws. And I don't know, because it probably depends. In different locations, there are different laws, protection laws, and especially now with the various rent freeze and stuff like that, that would also be so if rent freeze means that you can't ask for late payment, and a person will say, well, I'm Jewish, he's Jewish, he knows he needs to pay, I'm gonna go beyond. I don't care that the rent laws and the land, I don't care that there's a rent freeze or something. I want him to follow the simple interpretation of the halacha. Very nice, but we have a little bit of a problem. The problem that we learned, which is similar to the rule of bankruptcy, the automatic stay order, and all those laws that have to do with dina de malchusa dina, right? When there's the law of the land, you can't just ignore that. And we explained last class on Sunday that the meaning of the law of the land is that whenever the law is a sweeping law, which is for everybody, and the government considers it a tova, a benefit to society, that they should have certain laws for certain economical issues, that they feel that if they're not going to regulate certain laws, things could get out of hand. So that's why, for example, they have a bankruptcy law where a court, a judge can make what's called a judge can issue an automatic stay. they feel that society needs it from time to time. And they can also make what's called rent control, and if need be, if it's within the legal legislation, they can also make what's called a rent freeze. And if that's the case, it comes into a tricky, sticky type of halachic complication. On one hand, the Torah acknowledges, halacha acknowledges that money that's owed is owed, and there's no real way of getting out of that. But on the other hand, we do acknowledge this idea of dina de malchus dina, and we did explain, at least with regard to bankruptcy, that it's not so clear. There are various opinions as to what is the parameters of when is a person fully off the hook when there's a bankruptcy, debt discharge given over by the judge. So we said that Rav Moshe Feinstein would basically say, yes, you're off the hook. Whereas other poskim like the Chilkat Yaakov, right, we was mentioned over here, he holds that no, you're not really off the hook. Okay, the law of bankruptcy is differing with the Torah. We have to pick or choose. We choose the Torah. We don't choose the law of the land. What will happen if a Beis Din will try to force the person into a din Torah? In such a case, the Beis Din theoretically, legally will get sued in court. And as to my understanding, at the moment, the First Amendment, which is called the Establishment Clause, as it's known by, officially, according to legal experts in the Supreme Court, at the moment, they don't consider it a violation of church and state or the First Amendment if a person will try to go against bankruptcy law, or they'll try to go against rent freeze or something like that. So legally, a Beis Din would get into a bit of a problem if they're going to try to force someone to a din Torah paying something when legally they don't need to, according to the law of the land. And I would imagine that there would basically be the same case over here. However, there could very well be that even if you're legally off the hook, there might be that a person, if they can, should make a ethical agreement with whoever they do owe money to, at least according to halacha, simply because you don't want that there should be a lack of agreement on these matters, especially that some poskim have a different understanding of the halacha, that the law of the land and the law will not necessarily apply in this case. So you do want to at least mediate with them or try to come to an agreement that they shouldn't feel that they are being stolen from. And according to some opinions, they are correct. It's just that it's a debate on this matter. Okay, that's an important rule. Let's now, I'm skipping 15. Again, it's important, it's incumbent that everybody reviews the sections that beforehand to have clarity on the topics, but I'm just going over some selected points. So I want to go now to subsection 16. Again, if anyone has any questions or anything of that sort, feel free to go ahead and you could type your question, but it would be just easier if a person wants to say something or question something that they just put their mic on and ask if they would like, by all means. But okay, so meanwhile, we'll go to 16. So here it talks about selling a security from a loan. All right, so we said in the beginning of today's class how so important it is about knowing your rights when you're collecting a security. Because like I said, Beis Din today is very unlikely going to go into your house or send some messenger to start taking belongings to sell what you to pay off your debt. So you really only have either a guarantor, if at even that, because maybe the guarantor will say, I'm not going to pay. Then you're going to have to be worried about that. So the best assurance is always a security, okay? A security, a deposit, okay? So in 16, we learned that when the pay date passes, okay, so let's say it was a year loan, the year goes by, the lender must sell the security, and now he had a security already in his hands. He had a golden watch, which he believes worth about the value of the loan or whatever. He can't sell it the second the loan pay date is over. From the time of the pay date, he's got to wait 30 days after that time, okay? However, if the security is a type of item where there is a mitzvah incumbent upon the lender to return it by day or night, because we learned, like, let's say a guy has he had a blanket, and I took away the blanket from him as a security. But never, if the poor guy only has one blanket, so I have to go back to him in the evening and give him a blanket. Or let's say he has pots and pans and he uses it in the morning. So if I take it from him to remind him to pay the debt, in the Torah commands, I have to return it to him in the in the morning, right? So the types of deposits are items, security items, where it's a mitzvah to return them day or night. I'm not allowed. I'm not sanctioned in halacha to sell them under normal circumstances. Now, I use the word normal circumstances on purpose because in this subsection, we learn that there is an exception, as we'll mention in a moment. And I'll just now skip for a moment to the end. The Rebbe brings another view who is more stringent on this matter, who holds that you really should not take a security, selling a security of someone, even when you're taking it in the middle of the loan, if it's for something. The second opinion says that even if you lent someone on a deposit and it was something that he needs, and you have to therefore return it back to him, you could find a roundabout way how you would be allowed to sell it, but the alternative is better to stay away from that. Now, what would be, and that's what's called the Baal Nefesh. The Baal Nefesh is the master of the soul. This refers to somebody who's extra cautious to try to fulfill all the opinions if there's a dispute on the matter. And perhaps when it comes to bankruptcy or rent freeze and all those things, the Baal Nefesh, a person who is a master of the soul, would probably say, yes, maybe I'm covered according to some poskim, but not to all. So maybe a Baal Nefesh should be stringent and try to pay up the debt at some point, right? So that's Alter Rebbe, and usually in Choshen Mishpat matters, he does introduce this theme of a Baal Nefesh. I will say now, what is the scenario in which you are allowed to sell a deposit, a collateral, or the better word is the security, even when it's a type of item that it's a mitzvah to return it by day and night? So the Alter Rebbe says a simple example. Let's say he had a suit which was really fancy. It was $1,000 suit. On the other hand, it's the suit that he happens to be wearing on a very regular basis. Okay, we won't call it a suit because those things, we'll call it a leather jacket. So he needs to have some sort of jacket. So the Rebbe says that even if you have to return the jacket to him, I don't know, in the wintertime or in the evening when it gets cold, I'm just giving the example of a jacket, right? But because you don't have to give him his leather jacket, you can sell his leather jacket. You can buy a simple jacket from Ross, which is warm, and instead of it costing $1,000, it's only $50. You can use that extra money that you sold the jacket for to pay off the money that he owes. And now the $50 jacket you'll give to him. You say, look, you'll wear this when you need it, and you return to me whenever you don't need it, so that I can remind you about paying the loan. So in that case, although that the leather jacket was the type of item which was a vessel that you have a mitzvah to return to him back and forth, but since its value was more and you could have sold it for a high price and get him a more basic model, so all you need to do is collect it from him at a time when he's not obligated to, and when he doesn't need it. So that at that time it belongs to you. You sell it, you buy the simple one, you give to him, and you go back and forth. So that's allowed, but the Alter Rebbe even prefers maybe that's not the best idea. If possible, to be a Baal Nefesh, you should be stringent on this matter. Okay, all right. So that was 16. Moving on. Now we go to 17. What did we learn in 17? 17, it says about the idea of how much time is a typical loan. Okay, look, we learned earlier in this subsection 6 that you should always document your loans. And we said that not only should you preferably document it, but it's actually a prohibition to have a loan and it wasn't documented right? That's actually forbidden because a person could, deny it or forget about it. Maybe he'll only forget. He's not going to deny it, but he could forget about it, right? So because he could forget about it, it's what's called leading a blind person into a stumbling block, right? That's a lifnei iver type of scenario. You don't have to have a fancy contract. A simple IOU could technically work with the guy's signature on it. You could take a collateral, and you would not need to do a loan document. But for simplicity and clarity's sake, it would be best, even if you take a good mashkin, a good security, you should still have a proper IOU, a proper note. Why should you have a proper note? It's very simple, because there it'll say that the loan, for how much time it is. Maybe it should be, is it 2 weeks, a month, 3 months, a year, 3 years. So by doing that, you definitely will avoid any misunderstandings in the future. So number one, we learned in 16 was that when the pay date passes, the lender may sell the security 30 days after that. I'm sorry, we read that already. Oh, I should say one more thing on 16 that I don't think I mentioned, was that even though there is this idea of 30 days, but when that's only when you inform him, okay? You actually have to tell him that you want the money back. If you don't tell him, so even though the time has gone by, we might think that he says, okay, you're not in a rush for the money. So sometimes people don't want to bring it up, and then time goes by, and then he only says, you say, listen, it's been a year. He says, well, why didn't you ask me? I didn't think you were so impressed. I didn't think you were so pressed for money. So it's kind of important. That's what 17 goes on to also mention, that, okay, which is that you should inform the person also once the time has gone by. So even after the time of the payment is due, there is what's called a special 30-day grace period granted before a person has the right to sell the security, because ultimately the security might be something which has value, but I don't need it. And I go, this guy is not going to pay me. I see that his business is not doing too well. And okay, that's why I took a security. I really don't need this item. So I'm just going to go to the pawn shop and sell it, or sell it on Craigslist, or on whatever the other ones are called. Those, what's the famous online, not Amazon, the other one, the one that you sell the used stuff on for. It starts with an A or something. Whatever. You sell,
Hey,
what's it called again?
eBay?
eBay, right? eBay, yeah. Sell it on eBay or something. You have to be careful sometimes on eBay, because people could be selling stuff they stole, but it's not your. We'll learn about that in the Hilchos Geneva Gezela, but the assumption is that you don't have to assume that that's the case. Problem would be when you find out that it was stolen, if you have a way of finding it. Sometimes I've had questions that were asked me where people found out that they bought something, and it's clear to them, they have proof that it was stolen. Then what do? There are like cell phones, and it had people's personal information in it. Okay, whatever. That's another topic. Someone will get there. But okay, so now, so the due date is due. So you're like, okay, he doesn't want to pay. I need to sell this security. I really don't need it. So we say, before you sell it, even though that now his date is passed, you still should give him a 30-day grace period, granting before selling security. What is the purpose of this? So the Talmud talks about it. It is counted from the time when the payment is requested. And that's what I mentioned earlier. I said that it's not about, okay, the 30-day loan is finished. Okay, now I want to sell it. No, tell him that the loan is now officially finished, and that you want to know what's the deal with the payment. And if not, you're going to consider selling his mashkon, as it's called in Hebrew. You're going to sell his security, and about 30 days you're planning to sell it, if he doesn't come up with the money. So you've given him that final notice, which is important and required by halacha. The Gemara in Makkos assumes that any regular loan, if not specified, which really it should be, would be 30 days. But again, even though that 30 days, as I said, there's another 30-day grace period before you should actually sell the actual security. If the security, the Alter Rebbe also goes on to say that if the security is getting ruined within that time, the lender may sell it even within the 30 days. So the very famous example is what the Gemara in Perek HaMafkid talks about. It talks about, let's say a guy had, it's not talking about a security a security the person's holding on, but rather a deposit. Someone was given a deposit, and it comes around Erev Pesach, and they like, the Hilchos Pesach talks about this. It's chametz. If I don't sell it, it's going to get ruined, right? So well, not going to get ruined. It's going to be forbidden for him to be able to eat it. So today, usually they have a sale which you can sell it, and the person who buys it, the guy who buys it, usually has no interest in following through. He did buy it, but he ends up selling it back simply because if he wants, he feels that it's just not worth it to go through with the sale at the end when he sees how complicated it is to go through the whole sale. So, but even if we wouldn't be talking about like something of that sort, by the way, the mashkin does belong to the person. It's interesting. On one hand, it belongs to them, and on one hand, it doesn't belong to them. It belongs to them that they are allowed to sell it to avoid a loss. But on the other hand, it doesn't belong to them. We'll see that you can't really use it for your own personal benefits, as we'll see in a moment. But if the thing is getting well, I'll give you another example. Let's say you had some food item. He gave you a massive amount of foods, whatever. I don't know what it could possibly be, grain, but it's good for 30 days or so. And now, it's getting bad. So if you don't sell it right now, it's gonna dwindle. It's gonna get worse, lower quality. So in that case, you're allowed to sell it. So actually, in the Gemara, the commentators over there on that case talk about the reason that you're allowed to sell it. Is it because you're returning a lost object, or is it because if you don't sell it, you're acting as a damager? That's what the Subsection over there asked the following question. He says, "This and it's not really mine, and I should sell it, and I have the right to sell it. Why do I need to sell it? Is it because I want to return a lost object to a person? Because I'm like, if they're going to lose money, so by me saying, well, I didn't want to touch it because, it didn't belong to me, and meanwhile, as it gets dwindled in value, and you say your deposit now is only worth half of what it was originally worth, so that wouldn't be a big favor to him. So you could say, oh, the reason why he has to sell it is because he wants to be like returning a lost object. It's just like you have that authority to do so for, so he would have the right to sell it. There's another way of looking and say, no, because if you don't, you're going to be like a damager. Okay. But whatever way you look at it, at least in this case, you are allowed to sell it if you see there's a clear loss that's being incurred on the item by merely holding on to it and not acting. And now, we'll talk about how you sell it. What is the value you need to sell it? Are you able to sell it yourself? Do you need to have other people looking into its value? So here in 18, the Alter Rebbe talks about this, and he says that selling of the security needs to be under the auspices of 3 individuals who are fit to serve as a beis din, who can render halachic judgments. Okay? That means that they have to be qualified, that they understand business, and that they also are knowledgeable in halachas. Okay? Because anybody could sell something. The question is, are they selling it too quick before they've really investigated its real higher value? Or maybe they say you don't have to bother this person who's holding the security to wait and wait and wait. Whether let him just sell it as is. So you do need, the Alter Rebbe says, you need a beis din, as we'll say. People who are qualified to sit on beis din, they are the ones who will decide to be involved in the sale. The guy can't just say, I sold it because I needed to, I needed money. That would not be okay. And there are many reasons why it wouldn't be okay. Number one, maybe he undersold it. Number two, maybe he sold it to a friend of his who, he was doing that guy a favor. We want to make sure that it's ethical and it's legitimate, that everything is being done fairly. So now I mentioned that the Alter Rebbe brings the view that you should have 3 people who are fit to serve as beis din. It's interesting to point out, and we'll look in the Shulchan Aruch right now, that the view of that the Alter Rebbe follows the view of the Shach. The Shach is one of the famous commentators on the Shulchan Aruch in 40 and 70 in chapter 73:40, that you need people who are fit to serve as beis din. The Shulchan Aruch, the Beit Yosef, however, argues, he says that you can take any 3 kosher individuals, and that will be enough. So what would be the difference, and what does it mean, a court that is fit to render a judgment? What does it mean? Oh, you need people who are fit to serve as beis din. So the simple meaning is that you have to have at least one who's a Talmid Chacham, who understands the laws of sales and understands the laws of underselling and kinyanim, of transactions, and he understands the market value and the rights of the buyer and those. Okay, yes, yeah, one of them has to be a Talmid Chacham. He can take with him 2 people who are not necessarily Talmid Chacham, but they are clear from Averis. Like they can't be a Russia according to Halvah and others. They can't be doing that. They don't keep Shabbos, or even more refined than that. That they don't daven 3 times a day, or that they do some sort of an avera, even though that it's not the worst avera in the world, but they do an avera and they know that they do something wrong and they basically continue it. Then they would not be allowed to be serving on a beis din, even if they have a very qualified av beis din with them, right? Now, I want to go back here for a moment. Let's see the Shulchan Aruch. I should have it here. So this is, you see, this is the layout of the big Shulchan Aruch. And it's all in Hebrew. I'm just going to translate just one or little part from it. This is, as we said, Choshen Mishpat, chapter 73, the laws of loans. This is subsection 15. I want to just read a small part of it. And you'll see here how the Rav, the Alter Rebbe, differs with the Shulchan Aruch. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Mishiyesh biyadei mashvin, somebody who has a deposit. Shel chavero, right? I'm sorry, not correct to say deposit. We're talking about a security. I have a security on my friend. I gave him a loan. I asked him ahead of time. I know that maybe he won't come up with it. Give me this golden watch as a security, right? So I have that security, right? Lo yimkareno ala bebeis din. Says the Beis Yosef, Yosef Karo in his Shulchan Aruch, he writes, you cannot sell it now that you're ready to sell. The 30-day time period has gone by. Now I want to sell it. No. You can only sell it in a beis din. What does it mean a beis din? Do I have to go, I live in Los Angeles, I have to go to the RCC, I have to ask Rabbi Union the beis din to sell it? Not necessarily. No, not necessarily. What does it mean you sell it in a beis din? Ratzon loimer beis din shel shloisha hedyates. Says the Beis Yosef, 3 simpletons, 3 people who are clean from transgressions of averas. They're not necessarily Talmidei Chachamim, but they're simple Jews who are not doing any major. We don't know. We don't have knowledge that they're doing averas. They're okay. 3 people from your Beit HaKnesset. And you tell them from shul, guys, I need this. I have a deposit. I'm sorry, a security over here. The time has gone by. I have give him 30-day notice already. Here's the contract. I've already informed him about it. And maybe you show them proof that this is true or something, whatever. And now I want to sell it. I want and I have the beis din, these 3 guys from shul. I tell them, guys, I need to make beis din, we'll call them. Please make sure that you will be witnesses that this is being done fair. I need to sell his golden watch, and this is going to pay off for his loan. We're going to make sure that I'm selling at the proper price, and I'm not undercharging or something. I don't want him to come with complaints that I sold it for a price below what it should have been sold for. So that's what he does. He gathers those 3 people, he tells them about it. The Yishamu, so these 3 people then say, okay, let's see. We have some business knowledge. We evaluate what is it worth. Kamu shava, how much is it worth? As if you would sell it in the marketplace. Today, it's very simple. We have what's called eBay. We look at the same exact item that's sold on eBay, even though that you could say that this could be done with one person at this point, but no, You still should have your 3 people. I'm just saying eBay would be a perfect example of you see what things are being sold at. It says the date, similar items. The computer already does all the work for you. It shows you exactly. I mean, every item could be a bit different. Like one could be a little flawed and one wouldn't be. But okay, that's the purpose of the base. And that's what these 3 people will be doing. They'll do their due diligence to figure out that it's legitimate and they're doing a fair sale on it. Right? They sell it at that evaluation. And they give them permission, they give the guy permission to sell it at the value of what the experts consider to be a fair price. They give him an advice. They say, look, we understand that you could sell this at 200, or well, let's put it this way, as the Shach wants to explain. Don't sell it less than 200. That's how the Shach wants to explain the Shulchan Aruch here. He says, what do you mean? Why do they need to value it? Just sell it and see what the highest bidder will give. So that's what the Shach, this commentator over here, the Sifsi Cohen over here, this long thing here, he explains basically they need to evaluate to see that it shouldn't be less than a certain price. You know, if the guy says, well, I didn't find anyone, I sold it for $20 because I just didn't want to wait more than 20 minutes. They're like, fool, if you would have waited like 2 days, you would have sold this thing for $200. You know, you wanted a quick sell. You can't be so unfair to the person you took the security from. So that's what the Shach explains what the Shulchan Aruch here means, that you have 3 people evaluating. And they give him that advice. They say, sell it, make sure that the Beis Din doesn't need to see the sale. They're just saying it shouldn't be sold for less than whatever amount, X amount. For less than 200, it shouldn't be sold for. You know, hold off, basically, if it's could be sold for more, but don't sell it for less. You know, and then they say, we're not going to be when you sell it. You know, we have other things to do right now. But we advise you that when you sell it, you should have 2 witnesses to make sure that it was sold at that price, so that nobody's going to come with claims against you and say that you didn't end up you sold it at a higher price and now you're lying or something. So the borrower shouldn't say, they're going to say that it was sold way more than what the valuation was. And if the guy ended up selling, the Shulchan Aruch says that if he sold it without evaluating it, of these 3 people of the Shloisha, Shamin lo asaklum. Lo asaklum. So it's like he didn't do anything. It's really imperative that this person goes to 3 people to have it evaluated before he sells it. Otherwise, va'mecher batel. And then the sale will be like it was an invalid sale, even though that the price was more or less legitimate, but because he didn't do it with a Beis Din, we'll say to the buyer, you have to return the item, the seller has to return it. It didn't count. Okay? The problem will be what happens if you can't return it. That's another thing. Okay, that's why these details are not already mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch of the Alter Rebbe. He's not going to go into every little nitty-gritty detail, which the larger Shulchan Aruch does. The purpose of the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch is to focus on the relevant cases to basically every single person, and that's what we're learning. But again, in the larger Shulchan Aruch goes into more details. But I wanted to point out that the Shach that I just mentioned over here, so he says another thing. The Shach argues with the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch says you only need 3 basic people, right? Hedyatis is called. The Shach, and this is what the Alter Rebbe also explains, and the Alter Rebbe takes the view of the Shach. He says, no, they shouldn't be, they need to be that Sarachu Lamachu Bifnei. Here, let me make it super big. This is called the Otzar Chachma edition that I'm using right now. So the Shach says that you need to set. Oh, a little more down. Shitzarech ulamachu b'fnei Beis Din shia echad men gamer b'savar. Well, sorry, keep on saying the Alter Rebbe, but the Shach says that the Beis Din needs to be a valid Beis Din, that one of them is an expert in law, one of them is a legal halachic expert. Di'ilav, says the Shach, if that's not the case, ein zekore Beis Din ela Beis Din shel hadyatis. It could be a Beis Din of simpletons, and it might not be a valid deal. Okay. And then the Shach goes on to say that if you sold it without the Beis Din of mumchim, then the Shach quotes opinions that say it's not considered a sale at all. Even b'di'evid, even after the fact, they'll say that the whole thing didn't count. So that's clearly why the Alter Rebbe would favor the view of the Shach, which is much more stringent in this case. Let's go back to where we were. And in general, when we have an argument between the Shach and the Shulchan Aruch, we follow the later opinions. There's a very important concept, which it's not necessarily relevant only to what we're talking about right now, but it's a very large general topic, which is when you have a dispute between halachic codifiers. So the question is, who should we follow? Being that there are many opinions. So one general thing is like, let's say you identify as a Sephardic. So you say, well, I follow the rulings of the Beit Yosef and the Sephardic masters. And if I'm Litvish, I follow the views of the Ramah and the Ashkenazic masters, and specifically within where I went to yeshiva, my Rosh Yeshiva's Rebbe's and their poskim, right? That's usually how it works. Chabad, etc. The Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, that's a Tzedek, and the poskim how they. And of course, you could other poskim as well. But let's say there was a dispute between, the Mishnah Brura or the Alter Rebbe. So, the various circles they follow the posik of their community. Although it's very difficult to argue on the Shulchan Aruch of the Alter Rebbe, even one who's Nachabad, simply because of how much of a respected posik he was. Even by those who differed with him, they had very difficulty to argue on him due to his tremendous reputation as the posik of the author of the Shulchan Aruch. But regardless of that, generally we have a concept which is called the halacha is like the later opinion. Halacha kibasrai. What does it mean the halacha is like the later opinion? If the later opinion is of very high qualifications, that he understands all the opinions and he knows what the early predecessors say, and he still will argue with them and say what he says, then generally, assumingly, we follow the later opinion. So the Shach is of that caliber, and this is what all the poskim explain, that if the Shach or the Shulchan Aruch, generally speaking, we will follow the Shach. Because he is the later opinion, he knew what the Shulchan Aruch says. He was a couple hundred years after the Shulchan, maybe about 100 years, 100, 150 years after the Shulchan Aruch. So he knew it, and yet still argued and brought his proofs. So we will follow the Shach, and that's what the Alter Rebbe here is as well, following the view of the Shach. Okay, let's move on. Today we'll finish one more topic, which is in 22. This is skipping a bit, going to 22. So it's very important that even when you have a security deposit, right, that you do not use it for your own personal usage. Okay, because there are a few problems with that. Number one, the purpose of the security deposit, I use the word deposit, I'm sorry, maybe I should just call them the security on the loan. The purpose is to ensure that if the guy won't come up with the money, you have what to rely upon. But that doesn't mean you can also benefit from it. And at the end, he only borrowed $100 from you. You say, give me an item worth $100, whatever it was worth. He gives you that. You use it, you benefit. In the end, he ends up giving you the $100. He's like, okay, thank you. Here's your $100 that I borrowed. By the way, you're not supposed to say thank you on a loan. We'll talk about that maybe next class Sunday. It's a side thing. It's what's called an interest ribis concern. But okay, here's your loan. No, thank you. But there's ways I'll talk about how you can return something where you don't need to say thank you, and halakhically how it can be done properly. That's another topic. Okay, here's your loan back. Here's the money you gave me. So you got your $100 back, and you give back the security. If you're using in between, that's literally a problem of rebate, of collecting interest. You benefited from it. It doesn't have to be money. It can be the benefit of using of something. So therefore, that's one problem with using a security, right? More than that, the purpose of you having the security is like you're being paid. Why? Because ultimately you're called a shomer sachar, a paid watchman. Why are you a paid watchman? Because you are giving a loan. You're doing a mitzvah that Hashem commanded us in the Torah. A guy comes to you and says, I need to borrow $100. And you have a mitzvah to lend out $100. If you can afford it, you need to do so, right? So the assumption, the hope is that he will pay back. You'll make a contract. Fine, you need to make a contract with him, right? You will do so. But you know what? There is a slight chance that he might not pay you back, although maybe it's rare, but it could happen. So now that you're taking a collateral or a security, this is amazing. You're doing a mitzvah and you're ensured that you're not going to lose out on a deal. So this is what's called, the halacha says that's considered a paid watchman. You're like being paid. You've done your mitzvah and you're not in any loss scenario. You're not in any risk factors. So therefore, because you're like a paid watchman in this aspect, you have extra high responsibilities if something happens to it. And of course, as well, you can't use it. So there is an option that sometimes, let's say there's an item like an axe or some sort of shovel where it's made to get moved and used a lot. So there, you're allowed to rent out the collateral, the security. If you use that money to pay off his loan, and you say, "Oh, I was able to rent it for you. I got some money, and I used that to lower the debt that you owe me," that would be permissible again. But halacha says it have to be something where a person wouldn't mind if it gets used up a little bit. Okay, so I guess we'll finish on that. And Be'ezer Hashem, I believe Sunday we can continue. We'll be going into 3 weeks. We'll continue. We'll learn the continuing from 23 and onwards. And I'm going to try to get hopefully next week, if not in 2 weeks from now, hopefully I'll have a guest speaker, someone who's experienced in these halachas, how they come into people's claims and stuff of that sort. Someone like a based-in person. There's Hashem, and we'll not far from now we'll be having our first quiz coming up. So Be'ezer Hashem, just make sure that you have some chance to look it over and review. All right. So hope to see you guys.
Rabbi.
Yeah.
Sorry. Question regarding the security.
Yes.
Just you mentioned before regarding the Indian of Bal Nefesh. Is it like less Bal Nefeshi to ask for security? Like l'choira, like you become a paid watchman, but like maybe it's more, midas achsidis to not ask because you're pressuring him more because you have his.
Right. So in the mere dry halacha, it says that it depends. Like, let's say there's a difference in collecting the security before the loan starts and between collecting it in the middle of the loan. When you do it before the loan starts, you avoid a lot of halachic problems that could come up, especially about trying to give it back. Because if you get it in the middle of the loan, you have to make sure you return it to him back and forth. If it's one of those items that he needs to use certain times of the day or so. So you're avoiding a lot of problems if you take it from the beginning of the loan. There is no problem to take a security provided if you feel it's needed. So there's really no need to take a security if the guy is if you have nothing to worry about. But there are some people, the Gemara talks about Gavna, the Lo Parana, a guy who might not be able to pay the money, or he might not be trustworthy. So the halacha we learned last week said that it's sometimes better not to give a loan altogether when you are dealing with somebody who's very questionable as to his integrity or his mere ability to take loans, because maybe he's a dishonest person, maybe he has good intentions, but never he doesn't pay back his loans. Halacha in the Tillim it says lova Russia lo yasham, a borrower, a Russia who doesn't pay back. So in a way it says better not to, and it says this literally in the halacha. I'm not saying my own opinion. Literally it says it. Let me see if I can find the sit that says it again. I think it's in 6. No, in 5. In 5 it talks about it. If you look in subsection 5, it says better don't give a loan to such a person, because all you're going to do is cause them to do averis. You're going to cause them to sin because they're not going to stand to their word. And then then he's it's better don't get going. So now we don't. So you know what, you do want to do a mitzvah. You think that he really he needs the money. You want to lend him. So
let's say he needs the money, but he needs the money, but it's a very high loan. Let's say it's like $20,000, and you happen to have it.
There are other options. There are other options. You don't have to do. We didn't learn about the guarantor yet, but we'll learn about the guarantor. There's what's called the guarantor, the Arev, the guarantor, the Arev Kablan. There are different within those. Those are other options where you could, let's say, okay, if you won't come up with the money, I'm going after the person, their co-signer or someone like that, and you know that that person is totally, you could rely on them. You're not
Right.
worried. So
Right.
then, and if you really don't need a security, don't take one. But we're talking about when this is what's needed. Sometimes it's responsible and it's more ethical to take a security than not to take one. But sometimes it's not needed and therefore better not. So it's true as we learning these halachas, and if you learn carefully within the framework of these sifim, these subsections, you'll see sometimes it's better to, sometimes better not to, sometimes better to do a different option, and that's what we're navigating through. So in short, it is sometimes a good thing to take security, and sometimes it's not necessary. And if it's not necessary, then better to avoid it if you can. There are some people who are willing to give loans, and they say in the back of their mind, like, look, I want him to pay back, but you know what? If he doesn't, I'm not going to tell him, but I would forgive him. I'll consider it as donation or to help someone who's in need. You know, if you're on that type of situation, then technically you also don't even need to make a contract with him because, you know, you're like, okay, you know, you want to, you don't even mind so much he'll pay you back or not. There are people like that. There are people who are like, okay, I'll give him a loan, but you know, they know
And that would be okay, permissibly okay according to halacha.
if they know and they don't care if they don't end up getting paid back.
No, you the lender know, but the borrower doesn't know. The borrower thinks it's a loan.
Okay,
You the
it's always
lender in your
better.
mind
It's
say,
always better. It's always better to have everything clear because you might change your mind in the future. You might
right.
later on want the money, so it's always better. But me'ikar hadin, by the letter of the law, if you in your mind have decided that you really don't care if he whether he'll pay you back, it's at least learning merit. If you would end up not making a contract, we could rely on that. It's always better to have a document for various reasons. Maybe people will say, I lent more money to you and it was so nice, I gave you $200. What do you mean? You lent me only $100. Don't make as if you lent me $200. So we don't want to have any confusion in the future. So even if it's a friend to a friend or a family to a family member, whatever it may be, it's always good. Everything should be in black and white, and no one should be embarrassed of asking for a loan. It just, even if you were going to give it to him, you know, it might end up not being good if there'll be a confusion, whatever the issues may be. All right.